OverKill does a couple of different things. We're known for building these big monster trucks, race cars, automotive, and off-road fabrication. We also have a manufacturing side of the company that you guys got to see today. That's what funds a lot of the large-scale manufacturing equipment that allows us to then focus our creativity onto building really cool, unique off-road and aftermarket race cars and vehicles. So I'm going to give you guys a quick little tour. First thing we have over here is kind of our machining area. Brad Frazier with Hourglass Ingenuity. I'm sure a lot of you guys follow him. Brad just started working here at OverKill, and he's actually going to start doing all of our machining and our prototype R&D work. It's going to be so awesome to have someone with that type of creativity here inside of our shop. Hard to miss this gigantic thing. This is our BLM LT8 tube laser. So for all of our chassis work, some of the other stuff we do, the easiest way to manufacture it is in a larger volume at a faster pace. When the tubings come in through the machine, these arms will come down, pick up the tubes, and set them into a loading line. The chuck will come through, grab the parts, and the laser will process them. So it's a fully automated system. Mind-blowing, the capabilities of something like this. It's so neat because I went from notching tubes by hand for years and years and years. Then I bought my first TN 250 tubing notcher, and that just blew my mind to know that you could go from hand coping stuff, and then all of a sudden you go to a hole saw notcher, just does wonders for you. And then I jumped up to a TN 800, and that was just like a whole nother level in terms of precision. And you get into something like this where it maintains that same level that the TN 800 has. You can just pump out 1,000 tubes an hour as opposed to 1 or 2. In 2011, when I started my company, I dropped out of a PhD program in cellular molecular biochemistry. So I got a handful of degrees. Was kind of on track to go be a physician. As I kind of thought, as to what direction I want to go in my life. Since I was, 5 years old, I've always loved monster trucks. My first word I ever said was truck. If you ask my mom, she thought it may have been another word that rhymes with truck, but I couldn't visualize myself doing anything other than this. This is our Baileigh shop press, 75-ton setup. They work so well. They have a small footprint, so they're relatively easy to package. You can actually get die attachments, so if you wanted to press brake parts, you could do small onesie-twosie parts. If you wanted to do dimple dies and stuff like that. 7 or so years of use, and I mean, it stood the test of time for what it is that we use it for. 1340 Baileigh lathe. Dude, this lathe is rad. I'm not just saying that just because when I use a lathe, I'm terrified every single time I use it. I put my hair up, I make sure I don't have headphones on or anything like that. Attention to detail has to be on the machine itself. So what's nice about this is that it's not a gigantic lathe to where you've got this giant 5-gallon bucket spinning on the front side of it, but it's still so powerful and so efficient for everything that we use. We use this thing just about every single day. We don't want to trip over this contraption here. This is a camera support vehicle for Elite Camera Support, a motion picture industry company. They have to have a vehicle that can get them into a location and then level it out, but then still be able to shoot a nice tight shot. What we came up with is this crazy cantilevered style contraption, because the cantilever is obviously going to allow you to package your suspension nice and tightly in a confined space. So as you can see, it's sitting fully laid out. The only way we could do that is with a large travel airbag. So we got an 18-inch travel Firestone airbag off of a semi-truck. There's actually bypass shocks off a full-size monster truck that uses, because you got a company called OverKill building it for them. It's fully hydrostatic driven, so it uses hydraulic pumps instead of drive lines. You don't need to be going 70 miles an hour down the road with this. It's only going to go about 25, 30 miles an hour. So that's where having a 2.8 Cummins crate engine works great, because with that in conjunction with a hydrostatic pump, it'll only operate at about 3,000 RPMs. It's going to look pretty rad cruising down the desert shot. So I started just wanting to build my own truck. When I got the opportunity to bring it to the SEMA show, the ball just kind of started rolling from there. I didn't have grandiose plans of running a business or opening up my own shop. It was more or less me wanting to build something cool with my friends, and then answered one phone call that turned into another one, and before you knew it, it just started growing into something drastically bigger than what I could have ever imagined. And when I think of metal shaping, I think of some of the metal shaping savants that you see all over the Baileigh page, and I can't even begin to compare myself to those guys. But that's where I lean into, guys like David Engel and, his brother Greg and, Umberto with Vulcan Specialties, and some of these other guys that, they've got huge, deep-rooted sheet metal backgrounds with metal shaping. And I just try and be a sponge and listen to them as much whenever they do come out. If you're cutting any sort of tubing, got to use a bandsaw. We cut a bunch of different types of material out of it. We've ran that thing hard for, again, I think since about 2015, 2014. And besides changing blades, I haven't had a single problem with it. So for the price, it's 100% worth its weight in gold. This is kind of our welding fabrication area. These are our chassis tables. These are where we build all of our monster trucks, mini monster trucks. These two 5x10s, we'll actually bolt them together to make it, you know, a 5x20 table. And having the cutout inside is invaluable. Anybody that's had to weld a chassis before, you know, when you're having to try and lean over and weld something on the inside, dude, being able to jump in there and climb in there is great. You know, all this flat material, this laser cut stuff, we actually cut this stuff on our Trump 1030 flat sheet laser. It's definitely one of those pieces of equipment that in order to justify, you kind of really have to look at what it is you're trying to produce and what kind of scale you're trying to produce it in, because you can get into a Baileigh plasma table, a PT44, which I had one for 4.5 years, and dude, it's awesome, it's great. Problem with, you know, getting a big old fiber laser is it just has a huge footprint and a huge power bill and obviously a huge cost. But there's a lot of parts that we cut on here that 95% could get cut on a plasma table, and you could keep your tolerances pretty tight. The only difference is that if you needed to cut, you know, 1,000 of that part, then, you know, obviously with a fiber laser, you're gonna be able to process that stuff a lot faster. We build a lot of monster trucks, 2-inch 250 well, 4130 chromoly. I had a RDB 250 that I ran for a while, and it bent it just as good. The only problem was it looked like the thing was gonna fall apart when we were running it, only because we had so much stress underneath it. Whenever you start to get into bigger stuff, it's outside of its capabilities, and even, you know, they'll tell you that. Mass repeatability is awesome, especially on larger tubing, where, you know, you'll have huge springback numbers, and with something like that, run 100 of them, run as many as you want, and it'll just bang them out in a hurry. So for us, that thing is an absolute workhorse. This is a mini monster truck. These are kind of what we've gotten known for building here recently. It's 1,100 horsepower. It's got a Nelson Racing engine, blown LS. Front and rear steering, we built the axle housings for it. Got the hinges all set up, but we're gonna build some linear actuators that allow us to basically push a button and it'll tilt the hood up and down, because that's actually how you get in, as you get in from the front and the back. And then the neat thing, it's got a adjustable steering assembly. You know, if the big dog wants to jump in there, all you gotta do is just, you know, hit a couple of buttons, and there's switches on the sides of the seats, and the whole seat assembly moves forward and moves back. So you can effectively make it to where any size driver can jump inside of one of these. It's got Dodge, you know, 1-ton calipers on it and 1-ton rotors. So I mean, braking, in my opinion, is 10 times more important than acceleration. The transmission's identical to what's in a full-size monster truck. It's a 2-speed power glide, and then it's an SCS drop transfer case, a full billet transfer case. Insanely fun. There is nothing more fun than this. Think of like a Razor on steroids. So the very first mini monster truck I built was actually for the world's youngest mini monster truck drivers. It was awesome. It had a blown 468 cubic inch big block. It had a 1932 Willys body for it, and big old 48-inch tall tires. And it was funny because brought it to the SEMA show and people just like lost their minds. They were like, oh my gosh, like this is driven by a kid? Then they kind of found out that it was, you know, built by a couple of mid-20-year-old knuckleheads in a 2-car garage. And the following year we built another one, and the following year we built a couple more, and I mean, now I think we've built 16 of them or 17 of them. So over here is our VM 1054 mill from Baileigh. It's an awesome machine. This is something that we try to use day in and day out. We have some full CNC Haas machines, but anytime you have to get to where you got some manual machining parts, this thing is totally rad. It's got a full digital readout, basically modeled off of like a Bridgeport style series mill, and incredibly well built. It's ST40 collets on it. I mean, there's just so many great things about this that I can't be happier with it, for certain. So coming over here, we've got our Baileigh BP3305 press brake. Now, this is truly probably the best Baileigh piece of equipment that you can buy for the value. When you look at press brakes, most of them are massive. You know, they're a 100-ton machine. Nice thing about this thing is that you can fit it inside of a garage or in a small shop, and from a mass repeatability and production standpoint, there's just nothing else out there that is going to match the value as well as repeatability of this piece of equipment. So for us, building small brackets and tabs, sure, we got to use our laser cutter to cut it, but then when we go to form them, this thing does the job every single time. This is our first project that's actually going to be built here at OverKill Racing and Chassis for OverKill Racing and Chassis. It's a 1965 Mustang Fastback. It's obviously got a custom chassis, billet control arms, billet knuckles and C's, independent front and rear suspension. And there's something cool that this thing has that I think only one other Mustang in the world has, and it's a full carbon fiber body. We want to showcase all the carbon fiber. You know, we want to make it to where it looks like it's raw, and it's kind of like a race car with a license plate. 5.2 liter flat plane crank Voodoo engine. We're gonna put twin turbos on it, talking sequential shifting. It's gonna be insane. They're already the flagship, they're at the very top. So, you know, from day one, they showed so much interest in OverKill as a very raw new company. I was already biased towards them. I kind of already had like an allegiance to the, you know, the Baileigh army. And I think that as the company grew, any opportunity I had to buy new equipment, if I could buy a Baileigh-based equipment, I was going to do it. The quality is such a high standard, but then the affordability is right there with it. And so they make it to where, you know, you could find it in, you know, world-renowned shops, but then you can also find it in someone's garage. You can find the exact same piece of equipment in both places, and so that speaks volumes of Baileigh and what they stand for. So I couldn't be more proud to know that the initial foundation of my company was based solely around Baileigh equipment and dealing with Shane for you know, years and years. Yeah, Baileigh's social media is huge. I mean, if you look at just based on numbers, I mean, the volume of reach that they have, the way that they went about showcasing different people, they did it in such a unique, organic way that it really drew a lot of attention and attraction to Baileigh Industrial. You know, to be honest, it's kind of a rite of passage. You know, when you do get shared on the Baileigh page, if you stem back to the first time you welded something, what do? You weld it together, you say, oh, that's cool. You throw it in the trash bin. You don't have something that you can kind of like decoratively hang on the wall or display or give to somebody as a gift. And so what we've tried to do is we're trying to change that up a little bit. And we've been trying to give people welding kits that are tangible, something that you can be proud of, that you can kind of showcase. So this is a fairly common junction that you'll see in a lot of off-road desert racing trucks. People want to try and get into doing that stuff, but they may not have the ability to go in and, you know, work for a company right off the bat. So what we try and do is we sell them a kit that allows them to get the practice in their own garage and, you know, see if it's something that they really want to do and see if they can get comfortable doing it. And then once they finish it, they could obviously give this to an employer, and it's a nice tangible resume. When I think of my legacy, I want to have a gameful impact in terms of, you know, guys that work for me. You know, I hope that, you know, they appreciate, you know, the little things that I try and do for them day in and day out. From a customer standpoint, I hope that they, you know, appreciate the fact that we're not just about, you know, trying to spend as much of their money as we can, but, you know, really trying to create from conception to reality their dream project, whatever that is. Essentially have a legacy that, you know, from anything from mild to wild, you know, if you're gonna build it, you might as well overkill it. That was a pretty good cut.